The void between Earth and its moon erupted with a prismatic shimmer as the Zorn Collective's flagship emerged from quantum translation. Its hull, a lattice of living crystalline neural networks, pulsed with bioluminescent anticipation. Captain Vexnar had overseen first contact with 2,317 civilizations, each encounter following a meticulously predictable pattern. Approach, connect, assimilate. Earth would be no different. Preliminary scans revealed a planet of paradoxes, massive communication networks that seemed both primitive and impossibly complex. Billions of individual nodes, humans, generating petabytes of data every microsecond. The sheer volume of information was staggering, a digital ecosystem that defied traditional mapping. Vexnar initiated standard protocol. 12 simultaneous communication channels activated, each calibrated to penetrate the most resilient psychological barriers. Zorn telepathic technology had never failed. Not once in 3 galactic cycles. The first channel connected, then collapsed. Not blocked, not deflected. Simply unmade. The second channel followed, then the third. Each attempt resulted in something impossible. Not resistance, but total cognitive deconstruction. Information fed into the link would emerge transformed, fragmented, rendered meaningless. Linguistic recalibration, mumbled Sub-Commander Krell, fingers dancing across quantum interface panels, attempting alternative frequency modulation. Vexnar said nothing, mandibles clicking with rare uncertainty. Buried deep in a NSA communications hub in Colorado, Dr. Miranda Chen watched the alien attempt with clinical detachment. Her team had been preparing for this moment for decades, not through military might, but through an understanding of human cognitive diversity that ran far deeper than any technological solution. "They're trying traditional penetration," she murmured into her encrypted microphone. "Textbook approach. They have no idea." Around her, a dozen screens displayed fractalized representations of the alien communication attempts. Each probe dissolved into complex mathematical patterns that resembled organic fractals more than any standard communication protocol. The Zorn were discovering something fundamental about humanity. Connection was not a right to be claimed, but a privilege to be earned. Another channel collapsed. Vexnar's neural implants began to generate warning cascades. Something was fundamentally wrong with these communication attempts. The humans weren't defending. They weren't even responding. They were processing the invasion itself as raw information, breaking it down and reassembling it according to some incomprehensible internal logic. "Initiate deep scan protocol," Vexnar commanded, a tremor of something almost like fear entering his telepathic transmission. In that moment, a single transmission cut through the quantum noise, not from any official channel, not from any government network. It came from a personal smartphone, located in a small coffee shop in Buenos Aires. The message was brief, elegant in its simplicity. "We hear you. We choose not to listen." Quantum communication systems across the Zorn flagship began to shimmer and distort, not with the familiar patterns of technological interference, but with something alive, something that seemed to be studying them. Cliffhanger. As the last communication channel dissolved, Vexnar realized something that would reshape everything the Zorn Collective understood about first contact. They were no longer the observers. Somehow, impossibly, they had become the observed. The United Nations Emergency Xenological Response Center buzzed with controlled chaos. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter, her holographic displays showing real-time analysis of the Zorn's continued communication attempts. She was no ordinary linguist. She was a cognitive architect, specializing in the most complex communication systems humanity had ever encountered. "It's not about blocking," she explained to the assembled International Council, her voice cutting through the tension. "It's about transformation." Behind her, a massive screen displayed a living map of global cognitive responses. Each human interaction with the alien communication became a dynamic node, shifting and reconfiguring in real time. What looked like random noise to the Zorn was actually the most sophisticated adaptive network in the known universe. In a secure facility beneath the Andes, Marcus Chen's team worked furiously. They weren't just analyzing the alien attempts, they were studying how humanity itself was responding. Machine learning algorithms developed over decades of research were now being pushed to their absolute limits. "Look at this," Chen muttered, bringing up a visualization that made the other researchers lean in. Human cognitive responses weren't just defending against the Zorn's telepathic probes. They were actively learning from them. Across the planet, something unprecedented was happening. People who had never met, who spoke different languages, who came from entirely different cultural backgrounds, were experiencing subtle but profound cognitive synchronizations. Not a hive mind, something far more complex. At the Zorn diplomatic vessel, Ambassador Krulnax was experiencing something approaching panic. Their most advanced communication specialists worked around the clock, each failed attempt more frustrating than the last. "It's not possible," Senior Analyst Fricks repeated, her multi-jointed fingers dancing across quantum communication interfaces. "No species can be this adaptive." They had encountered resistance before, primitive species with rudimentary mental shielding, technologically advanced civilizations with sophisticated jamming technologies. But this was something entirely different. The Zorn communication logs told a story of increasing desperation. Each probe was slightly different, more sophisticated than the last. Each probe was consumed, analyzed, and fundamentally altered by human cognitive systems. Dr. Rodriguez's team had discovered something remarkable. Human brains weren't just processing the alien communication. They were generating entirely new forms of linguistic and cognitive expression in response. It was as if humanity was writing an entirely new language in real time, using the Zorn's communication attempts as raw material. "We're not blocking," Rodriguez explained to the UN Council. "We're translating. But the translation is so fundamentally different that it appears as noise to them." A classified communication from a deep-cover NSA linguistics team revealed something even more extraordinary. The cognitive responses were creating a kind of distributed intelligence, not a unified consciousness, but a dynamic, ever-shifting network of potential understanding. Marcus Chen's most advanced AI system generated a breakthrough visualization. What looked like random interference was actually a complex mathematical language. Each human brain was a node in a living, breathing computational system that defied traditional understanding of communication. "They're trying to understand us through invasion," Chen said quietly. "But we're creating understanding through adaptation." The Zorn diplomatic vessel received another transmission, not from any official channel, not from any government network. It was a music file, a piece of experimental jazz from a Brooklyn-based musician. When analyzed through Zorn communication protocols, it generated a response that crashed their entire communication matrix. Ambassador Krulnax stared at the transmission logs, mandibles clicking in a rhythm that suggested something close to fear. Cliffhanger. As the last communication channel dissolved into a symphony of mathematical impossibility, a single question emerged from the quantum noise. What if communication was never about understanding, but about transformation? The Zorn's secondary command fleet arrived 3 days after the initial contact, bringing with them technologies that had systematically subdued civilizations across 3 galactic sectors. Quantum neural disruptors capable of flattening entire planetary consciousness, mimetic warfare algorithms that could dissolve cultural identity in microseconds, psychic amplification arrays that could strip away individual thought like peeling an organic onion. They were not prepared for humanity. Dr. Aisha Okonkwo, lead researcher at the Global Cognitive Defense Initiative, watched the incoming alien technologies with a mixture of scientific curiosity and cold calculation. Her team had been preparing for this moment for decades, not through conventional military strategies, but through a radical understanding of human cognitive plasticity. "They're coming with everything they have," she muttered into her quantum-encrypted communicator. "And they have no idea what's waiting for them." The first wave of Zorn neural disruptors activated simultaneously across major population centers. Massive energy signatures erupted from orbital platforms, designed to generate a telepathic interference pattern that had systematically crushed thousands of civilizations. In Sao Paulo, a street vendor selling empanadas didn't even look up. In Tokyo, a high school student solving a complex mathematics problem continued writing, her pencil never breaking stride. In Cairo, an elderly librarian turned a page in an ancient manuscript, completely unaware of the cosmic warfare happening above her. The neural disruptors began to fail. Not gradually, not with resistance, but with something far more terrifying. They began to transform. Marcus Chen's monitoring station captured the impossible. Each neural disruptor was being systematically decoded, its fundamental communication matrix rewritten by something that wasn't a defense mechanism. It was a living, adaptive translation system. "It's like they're teaching the weapons our language," one of Chen's analysts whispered. Ambassador Krelnax watched in mounting horror as their most sophisticated psychological warfare technologies were consumed and repurposed. The Zorn had technologies that could dissolve planetary consciousness, technologies that had worked on civilizations far more advanced than humans. Humanity wasn't just resisting, it was learning. Deep in a DRPA research facility, Dr. Rodriguez's team discovered something extraordinary. The human response wasn't uniform. It was a distributed, chaotic system of individual and collective adaptation. Each human brain was processing the alien technology differently, creating a response so complex it defied traditional computational models. "They're treating every attempt to understand us as a form of communication," Rodriguez explained to her team. "Not as an invasion, but as a dialogue." The Zorn's secondary command structure began to fragment. Their neural networks, designed for instantaneous collective decision-making, started to generate warning cascades. Something was fundamentally wrong with their invasion protocol. Their weapons were becoming something else. In orbit, the first quantum neural disruptor completed its transformation. Instead of a weapon of psychological destruction, it generated a complex mathematical signal, a signal that contained something unexpected. A song. Not a human song, not an alien song, something in between, a mathematical representation of communication itself. Ambassador Krelnax received the transmission personally. As the signal parsed through their communication matrices, something unprecedented happened. The Zorn began to understand that they had completely misunderstood the nature of communication. It wasn't about invasion. It wasn't about understanding. It was about transformation. Cliffhanger. As the last neural disruptor completed its metamorphosis, a single line of code emerged, a message that would haunt the Zorn collective for generations. "Hello, would you like to learn how to talk?" The world's most secure data center, buried 2 kilometers beneath the Atacama Desert, went dark precisely 17 minutes after the Zorn launched their full-scale cyber assault. To most, this would have signaled catastrophic failure. To Dr. Emmanuel Coro, it was the opening move of humanity's most complex defense. Now, she whispered into a quantum-encrypted communicator that wasn't supposed to exist. Across the planet, seemingly unrelated systems began to shift. Traffic light networks in Mumbai, agricultural monitoring systems in Brazil, medical diagnostic computers in rural African clinics. Digital infrastructure that appeared disconnected suddenly began to pulse with a complex, living rhythm. The Zorn's invasion wasn't just technological. It was a comprehensive attempt to deconstruct human information systems, to map and control every digital node of human civilization. They had no idea what they were walking into. Dr. Marcus Chen watched from a mobile command center that looked more like an artisan coffee shop than a high-tech war room. His team wasn't fighting a traditional battle. They were conducting an orchestrated performance of technological misdirection that would make the most sophisticated magic trick look like a child's parlor game. "It's not about blocking," Chen explained to his core team. "It's about turning their own methodology against them." The Zorn's cyber algorithms were designed to be predatory. They would seek, They would analyze. They would consume. Humanity's digital infrastructure was presenting them with something entirely different, a living, breathing ecosystem that responded to invasion with creativity rather than defense. In Tokyo, a teenager's modified gaming rig became a quantum decryption node. In Buenos Aires, an independent radio station's backup server transformed into a complex signal relay. In Cape Town, a small medical research center's computational array began to generate mathematical patterns that would make theoretical physicists weep with joy. Ambassador Krulnax watched in mounting horror as their most sophisticated cyber invasion technologies were systematically consumed, analyzed, and transformed. What should have been a straightforward technological conquest was becoming something else entirely. The Zorn had invaded thousands of civilizations. They understood technological systems as static, predictable entities. Humanity was showing them that technology could be a living language. Each of their invasion algorithms was being studied, decoded, and then used to generate something new. Not a defense, not a counterattack, something far more terrifying, a dialogue. Dr. Okoro's team had prepared for this moment for decades. The seemingly random data center shutdown was a carefully orchestrated introduction to a far more complex system. Humanity's digital infrastructure wasn't a network to be conquered. It was a living organism that could regenerate, adapt, and communicate in ways the Zorn couldn't comprehend. "Look," whispered one of Chen's analysts, pointing to a holographic display that looked more like an abstract painting than a traditional monitoring system. "They're not just defending. They're learning." The Zorn's cyber invasion algorithms began to generate unexpected outputs. Mathematical sequences that contained musical properties, encryption patterns that seemed to breathe, digital pathways that resembled neural networks more than computer code. In orbit, the Zorn command ship systems began to shimmer with an impossible iridescence. Their supposedly impenetrable quantum communication matrices were being slowly, methodically transformed. Not destroyed. Not blocked. Translated. Ambassador Krulnax received a transmission, not from any official human government channel, not from any military or scientific institution. It came from a personal email account. The subject line read simply, "Would you like to talk?" The message body contained nothing but a series of complex mathematical sequences that seemed to pulse with an almost living quality. Cliffhanger. As the last of the Zorn's invasion algorithms dissolved into a symphony of impossible communication, a single question emerged from the quantum noise. What happens when an invasion becomes a conversation? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Rosario Mendez, a cultural anthropologist working in a small research center in Guatemala. Her life's work had been studying how human cultures process information, communication, and collective memory, a field most of her colleagues had dismissed as too abstract. Now she held the key to understanding humanity's most profound defense. "It's not about individual intelligence," Mendez explained to the hastily assembled Global Council, her presentation displaying intricate networks of cultural information exchange. "It's about our capacity for contextual adaptation." The Zorn had encountered species with technological defenses, species with physical resilience, species with complex communication systems, but they had never met a species that could transform entire paradigms of understanding in real time. Deep in the Amazon rainforest, an indigenous community that had minimal digital infrastructure was experiencing something extraordinary. Their traditional communication methods, a complex system of oral storytelling, gestural communication, and ecological understanding, began to generate signals that perfectly complemented the global human response to the Zorn invasion. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's linguistic analysis team discovered something remarkable. The way humans communicated wasn't linear. It was fractal. Each individual interaction contained the potential for entire universes of meaning. "Look at this," Rodriguez said, displaying a complex holographic representation of human communication. "We're not just sharing information. We're creating living systems of understanding." In a secure facility beneath the Andes, Marcus Chen's team was decoding something unprecedented. The human response to the Zorn wasn't a single strategy. It was a continuously evolving, distributed intelligence that drew from every aspect of human experience. A teenager's meme could be as strategically significant as a military communication. A street musician's improvisation might contain mathematical complexity it could confound alien intelligence. An elderly person's memory might generate communication patterns that defied traditional understanding. Ambassador Krulmax received another transmission. This time, it was different. Not a technological signal. Not a mathematical sequence. It was a story. Not a human story. Not an alien story. Something in between. A narrative that seemed to exist in multiple states of possibility simultaneously. The Zorn's communication analysts worked frantically. Their most sophisticated translation matrices collapsed when trying to parse this new form of communication. It wasn't language. It wasn't mathematics. It was something else entirely. Dr. Mendez's research revealed the fundamental truth. Human culture was an adaptive system that transformed information through context, emotion, and collective memory. Each individual was a node in a network far more complex than any technological system. We don't just communicate, she explained. We create meaning. The global human response was becoming something that defied traditional understanding of intelligence. It wasn't a unified consciousness. It wasn't a collective mind. It was a distributed system of potential, each individual contributing to a larger understanding that was constantly in flux. In orbit, the Zorn command ship's communication systems began to generate unexpected outputs. Their attempts to analyze human communication were producing results that looked more like abstract art than intelligence reports. Mathematical sequences that contained emotional resonance. Technological signals that carried cultural memory. Communication patterns that existed in multiple states of possibility. Dr. Rodriguez's team discovered something that would reshape understanding of intelligence itself. Human communication wasn't about transmitting information. It was about creating shared context. A child's drawing could contain more communicative complexity than an entire alien technological database. A local folk song might generate more meaningful information than a military communication protocol. The way a community mourned its dead could be a more profound form of intelligence than any technological system. The Zorn were beginning to understand that they hadn't encountered a species to be conquered. They had encountered a living system of understanding. Cliffhanger. As the last communication channel dissolved into a complex tapestry of cultural possibility, a single question emerged from the quantum noise. What if communication was never about transmission, but about transformation? The Zorn research conglomerate convened an emergency session aboard their primary analysis vessel, a massive construct that had processed the cognitive patterns of thousands of civilizations. This time, something was fundamentally different. Dr. Vrix, their lead xenopsychological analyst, projected holographic representations of human communication that looked more like living art than intelligence data. Tendrils of quantum information danced and reconfigured themselves, defying every known principle of cognitive mapping. We are not dealing with a species, Vrix reported to the assembled Sinological Council. We are dealing with a dynamic system of perpetual becoming. Buried in a classified research facility in New Zealand, Dr. Imani Okoro's team had been tracking something extraordinary. The human response to the Zorn wasn't just defensive, it was generative. Each alien communication attempt was being transformed into something entirely new, a process that went beyond adaptation into pure creative generation. Their research revealed a staggering truth. Human consciousness operated more like a quantum system than a traditional information processor. Individual human minds were not discrete units but interconnected nodes in a constantly shifting network of potential understanding. A street artist in Mumbai might generate a piece that contained more cognitive complexity than entire alien civilizations' communication archives. A child's playground game could encode communication strategies that would take decades to fully unpack. The way a community processed grief could be a more sophisticated form of intelligence than any technological system. The Zorn's most advanced psychological analysis tools began to generate increasingly bizarre outputs. What should have been clean, predictable data streams became living, breathing representations of possibility. Mathematical sequences that contained emotional resonance, technological signals that carried cultural memory, communication patterns that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Ambassador Krulnax received a transmission that defied all previous understanding. It wasn't a message. It wasn't an attack. It was something in between, a form of communication that was itself a process of creation. The transmission contained fragments of a mathematical proof, portions of a musical composition, echoes of a cultural memory, quantum statistical variations, emotional resonance patterns. Each element was incomplete. Each element was simultaneously whole. Dr. Rodriguez's linguistic team discovered that human communication was never about direct transmission. It was about creating shared context, about generating possibilities that didn't previously exist. The Zorn's psychological warfare technologies began to transform, not through external intervention, but through their own attempts to understand. Each probe, each analysis attempt became a collaborative act of creation. Their most sophisticated neural networks started generating outputs that looked suspiciously like art, like poetry, like pure possibility. In the depths of the Amazon rainforest, an indigenous community that had minimal technological contact was generating communication patterns that perfectly complemented the global human response. Their traditional knowledge systems, built on generations of ecological understanding and oral tradition, became a critical component of humanity's collective response. "We're not just resisting," Dr. Mendez explained to her research team. "We're reimagining the entire concept of communication." The Zorn were experiencing something unprecedented. Their invasion was becoming a conversation. Their attempt to conquer was transforming into a collaborative act of understanding. Their most advanced psychological analysis tools were failing not because of external resistance, but because they were being fundamentally transformed by the very act of observation. A single human could contain multiple states of potential communication. A community could generate intelligence that defied traditional computational models. A global network of human interaction could create understanding that was itself a living, breathing entity. Ambassador Krulnax realized something that would reshape the Zorn's understanding of intelligence itself. Humanity was not a species to be understood. Humanity was a process of continuous becoming. Cliffhanger. As the last psychological analysis probe dissolved into a complex tapestry of possibility, a single question emerged from the quantum noise. What happens when an attempt to understand becomes an act of creation? The first whispers spread through quantum communication networks faster than light. Not a message, not a warning, something more fundamental. A civilization had been encountered that didn't just resist invasion. It transformed it. Isolated research outposts across 3 galactic sectors began receiving fragmentary transmissions, not from humanity, not from the Zorn, but from something in between, a form of communication that defied every established principle of interstellar discourse. Dr. Arya Nakamura, stationed on a deep space research platform near the Carina Nebula, was the first external scientist to fully comprehend the magnitude of what had occurred. Her specialty was xenological communication systems, a field that had become exponentially more complex in the hours since humanity's encounter with the Zorn. "It's not about what they did," she transmitted to her colleagues, her voice carrying a mixture of academic excitement and existential wonder. "It's about what they are." The Galactic Xenological Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 417 different civilizations gathered, some physically, some through quantum projection, some through methods of communication humans couldn't begin to comprehend. They had come to understand what happened when the Zorn encountered Earth. The invasion hadn't failed. It had transformed. Preliminary reports suggested that human communication was less a method of transmission and more a generative process. Each attempt to understand humanity created new forms of intelligence. Each probe generated possibilities that didn't previously exist. On a research station orbiting a neutron star, a team of crystalline intelligences began reconstructing the human-Zorn interaction. Their analysis tools were the most sophisticated in known space, capable of parsing communication patterns across multiple dimensional states. What they discovered terrified them. Humanity wasn't a species. It was a process, a living system of continuous becoming that transformed every interaction into a collaborative act of creation. The Zorn's most advanced psychological archives were being systematically rewritten, not through invasion, not through resistance, but through a process of collaborative understanding that went beyond traditional concepts of communication. Dr. Marcus Chen's research team had moved beyond traditional scientific observation. They were now documenting something that looked more like the emergence of a new form of universal intelligence. We're not just sharing information, Chen transmitted to the Galactic Xenological Council. We're generating entirely new modes of understanding. The implications were staggering. Every civilization that had previously encountered the Zorn had been systematically cataloged, understood, and often subjugated. Humanity presented something entirely different, a form of intelligence that was itself a moving target. A child's drawing could contain more communicative complexity than an entire alien civilization's database. A community's mourning ritual might generate more meaningful information than 1,000 years of technological development. The way humans processed collective trauma could be a more sophisticated form of intelligence than any known computational system. Ambassador Krelnax's final report to the Zorn Collective was submitted in a form that was part scientific analysis, part philosophical treatise, part artistic expression. It defied traditional communication protocols, becoming itself a living document that continued to generate new meaning. The key revelation was simple yet profound. Humanity was not something to be understood. Humanity was a method of understanding. Across the galaxy, civilizations began to reconsider everything they knew about intelligence, communication, and the nature of consciousness itself. The research stations, the xenological archives, the most sophisticated analysis tools in known space all came to the same conclusion. Something fundamental had changed, not just in how civilizations communicate, but in the very nature of communication itself. Dr. Nakamura's final transmission to the Galactic Xenological Council captured the essence of the discovery. We are no longer asking how species communicate. We are discovering that communication itself is a living process of continuous creation. Cliffhanger. As the last transmission dissolved into a complex tapestry of possibility, a single question emerged from the quantum noise of galactic communication. What happens when understanding becomes an act of collective imagination? The final confrontation was neither a battle nor a negotiation. It was an act of mutual creation that would redefine the very concept of first contact. Aboard the Zorn flagship, Ambassador Krelnax stood before a holographic representation that was no longer a communication interface, but a living canvas of possibility. The human transmission had become something impossible to classify. Part mathematical theorem, part emotional landscape, part quantum probability matrix. Dr. Elena Rodriguez and Marcus Chen watched from a secure facility that was simultaneously a research center, a diplomatic outpost, and a collaborative space of unprecedented potential. They understood that this moment was not about victory or defeat, but about a fundamental reimagining of interspecies communication. "We're not talking," Chen murmured, watching the holographic display shift and breathe. "We're becoming." The transmission from humanity was not a message. It was an invitation. Fragments of human experience danced across the interface. A child's first steps. The mathematical elegance of a snowflake's formation. The complex emotional landscape of a community mourning. The intricate neural pathways of collective memory. Quantum probability models that seemed to pulse with living energy. Ambassador Krelnax realized that the Zorn had never truly attempted to communicate. They had only tried to understand through invasion, categorization, control. Humanity was offering something else entirely. A method of understanding that was itself a form of creation. In the Amazon rainforest, an indigenous elder who had never touched a computer watched the sky. Something fundamental was changing, not through technology, not through language, but through a deeper, more profound connection that transcended traditional understanding. Dr. Rosario Mendez's research revealed the ultimate truth. Human communication was not about transmission of information, but about generating shared context. Each interaction was an act of collective imagination. The Zorn's most advanced translation matrices began to generate outputs that looked suspiciously like poetry, mathematical proofs, emotional landscapes, potential futures, living memories. On a quantum research station orbiting a distant neutron star, scientists from multiple civilizations watched in collective awe. This was not first contact. This was the emergence of a new form of universal intelligence. We are not explaining. Dr. Rodriguez transmitted to the Zorn flagship. We are inviting you to participate in a process of mutual becoming. The human transmission contained everything and nothing. It was simultaneously a scientific treatise, an artistic expression, a mathematical model, and a deeply personal invitation. Ambassador Krulnax understood the impossible truth. Humanity was not a species to be understood. Humanity was a method of understanding. The final transmission was not a message. It was an ecosystem of potential. Quantum communication networks across multiple civilizations began to shift, not through invasion, not through resistance, but through a collaborative act of imagination that defied every previous understanding of intelligence. Dr. Chen's last annotation to the Galactic Xenological Council captured the essence of the encounter. Communication is not about sending and receiving. It is about generating new possibilities of understanding. The Zorn flagship's systems transformed, not through external intervention, not through technological conquest, but through the very act of attempting to comprehend humanity's unique form of intelligence. What began as an invasion became a conversation. What seemed like resistance became an invitation. What looked like conflict transformed into creation. Humanity had not defeated the Zorn. Humanity had reimagined the very concept of encounter. Final revelation. In the vast cosmic theater of potential, some barriers are not meant to be crossed. They are meant to be continuously, collaboratively generated. Closing line. Understanding is not a destination. It is a journey of perpetual becoming.